As if deregulation of the state's dairy industry wasn't concern enough for farmers, now politics stands between producers and the July the 1st deadline. The state government's dairy industry bill has twice been blocked in Parliament, with the National Party winning upper house support for an amendment, calling for a state-based price support scheme. And if the government can't get the bill through, it can't deregulate the industry.
The bill is very much now under threat, and now I'm bringing in contingency plans to continue on with the regulated industry from the 1st of July unless there is a dramatic turnaround.
Access to the federal government's $1.7 billion structural adjustment package is then in jeopardy. The Nationals are calling on their country Labor colleagues to support the amendment, while the government says it won't top up the existing financial package. Instead, it's put forward a multi-million-dollar offer of financial counselling and advice services. But whatever the outcome, there's a difficult time ahead for farmers.
Deregulation means a reduction in their 53 cents a litre for milk. But without deregulation, they're going to be undercut by the Victorians anyway.
It's hoped a decision will be made on Thursday. Brooke Webster, NBN News.
Taxi driver Alex Tagarulius was at home resting today, battered and sore after the most frightening night shift in his 10 years as a cabbie. When he pulled into the mobile service station on Parry Street to fuel up around 3 this morning, he was attacked.
He's come around to me with a big knife, trying to get into me.
Alex fought off the man who demanded his takings and his car. Police say he just menaced the two attendants at the station, grabbing a small amount of cash from the till.
Now, at this stage, the man was armed with a tomahawk. He seemed to be partially disguised in a similar way to an American Indian, with the war paint on the face and some feathers in his hair.
The cabbie was eventually helped by service station staff.
I've been attacked in the car before, and that didn't worry me as much as it worried me last night, because he was well armed. He was out for business.
The 51-year-old says he has no sympathy for his armed attacker.
If they can't get out there and earn their living, well, they deserve what they get.
A 35-year-old man remains in custody and will face Newcastle Court tomorrow, charged with armed robbery and assault. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Richard Owens owned one of the largest family businesses in Australian retail history before he sold it. But the Newcastle Business Club wanted to hear how he reinvented himself at 60.
Which I have done. I've gone out of food and into wine with the vineyard up at the valley and recent purchase of the old Oakvale Winery.
The Elliott family established Oakvale Wines at Pecolbin in 1893. But while his new business interest is not in Newcastle, he has ideas on how the city could also reinvent itself. He wants it to focus on historical features like Fort Scratchley and the Convict Lumber Yard.
More importantly, I want to talk about an opportunity that I think exists for Newcastle to create itself in the city as a living museum. And that might sound funny, but it's already started.
He's also in favour of the Lord Mayor's proposal to trial the removal of trains from Broadmeadow to Newcastle.
And I think the idea of having a slow tram or light rail meandering up the corridor that is now the railway line would just be suited to this perfectly.
Service station operator Richard Halstead and his staff aren't looking forward to Saturday morning. They're preparing to explain to angry customers why fuel and almost everything else in his shop has gone up in price.
The motorists will pay more on Saturday morning, we'll pay more for it to be delivered, and we'll make less at the end of the day.
The federal government will give oil companies a 6.7 cent a litre cut in the excise on fuel, but the companies say that won't cover the full effect of the GST, so the shortfall must be passed on to the consumer. Today, unleaded fuel in Newcastle cost up to 93 cents a litre. Saturday, it'll be higher.
Now, the motorists in Newcastle may be lucky enough for a discount war to break out on Saturday morning, but I'd say that's highly unlikely at the moment.
And it appears Newcastle will also miss out on a regional subsidy.
Unfortunately for Newcastle and also Canberra, those areas are classed as metropolitan areas and therefore don't qualify for any assistance through the new grant scheme.
Known in Newcastle as the buy of the season, David Fairley has found it hard to put a price on his year at the Knights as he plays some of his best football. But it seems English club St Helens has found the mark, with Newcastle simply unable to come close with the money.
I told the directors and the board that my first priority is to stay here, but at the end of the day, the money that's offered by Newcastle compared to St Helens was I just couldn't compare it. And how could they? Fairley agreed to a deal believed to be worth around $400,000, money few Australian clubs can match. To think, you've got players like Tony Martin, who's 21. For a 21-year-old to be going and pursuing his career in England says a lot about the money that's on offer over there. Fairley will join current teammate Peter Shields at the English club, while Matthew Johns has signed with Wigan. With injury ruling out David Fairley today and concerns over Clinton O'Brien, Newcastle can ill afford to lose Butterfield, let alone Tahu, against the Sydney Roosters.
Bernard Grace, the Queen's Counsel, is going to, on our behalf, represent them tonight and hopefully get them off.
Butterfield faces 4-week suspension if found guilty, while Tahu could go for 2 after his tackle on Jamie Ainscough. Ironically, the Dragons winger has nothing to answer for after this shot on Tahu, which just adds to the club's frustration after those no-try rulings, and they plan to let the league know all about it.
Amana had his nose broken in the incident, so we've really come out of that game with a lot of pluses, I must say.
Pending tonight's judiciary outcome, Tahu is named on the wing with Daniel Abraham on standby, while Matthew Johns has been named to play. Matt Parsons will start if Butterfield is suspended, with Steve Simpson, the likely starter for the injured Fairley, to rejoin newly signed Sean Rudder in the back row. The 21-year-old has agreed to a 2-year deal.
I wanted to stay here and probably, I could look at myself down the track as being like a one-club man.
Also off contract, Simpson, though, isn't rushing.
Not exactly sure what's going to happen yet, but hopefully I'd like to stay in Newcastle for sure, but we'll have to wait and see, I suppose.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The public has in the past taken for granted that emergency services are always as close as the phone and can be on the scene within minutes. But ambulance officers say that's not always the case.
And we've had cars out of the area for 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 9 hours, leaving certain areas of the Hunter uncovered for that period of time.
Just last week, the union claims an ambulance from Curry was taken out of the area for 7.5 hours, time that could have been detrimental in the case of an emergency. But the problems don't stop there. Lake Macquarie crews are often called to the Central Coast because local crews are tied up with lengthy delays at Gosford Hospital.
We don't want the response times to be longer. They're long enough as they are. We want the officers that are tasked to that area and have been established in that area through a review process that they're needed in that area to stay in the area and to serve those people within the area that they're tasked for.
The matter is now before the Industrial Relations Commission, who earlier this week ordered the union to lift temporary work bans. But since both parties have failed to resolve the dispute in recent talks, the Commission will now step in with a decision to be handed down on the matter tomorrow. Helen Kapalos, NBN News.
Nutrient levels in the lake system are at the centre of the problem, but the community itself is seen as the heart of the solution. But the Department of Land and Water Conservation says the depth of the lake and the low turnover make it extra sensitive and therefore even more difficult to manage.
It is a system that doesn't have much turnover, so it becomes effectively a sink for nutrients that are washed into it. Nutrients come into that lake system from the whole catchment.
And with no quick fix solution in sight, attention has instead turned towards community education and the implementation of best practice standards.
And things like the River Care Group that's formed and has produced a river care plan for the Upper Mile, for example, that covers about 30 kilometres of the Upper Mile River, and they're looking at ways that they can improve their part of the catchment.
The department says it's not possible to point the finger of blame. Rather, the lake system needs a combined community effort to restore the pristine waters.
We're also trying to raise awareness of the general catchment community, both the urban as well as the agricultural areas, and we've engaged a facilitator to start working with that community about developing a catchment plan so that people can contribute in their own little patch.
Brooke Webster, NBN News.
In the last few weeks, we've seen some of the game's biggest names say they're off to England for the big money contracts. Jason Hetherington, Brad Clyde, Brett Mullins and Tony Carroll, just to name a few, while Newcastle alone has lost 3 with Dave Fairley, Matthew Johns and Peter Shields. It would be easy to say blame the fat English pay packet, but if you look at the problem a little deeper, it really starts at home and it's all about the salary cap. In a bid to reel in big spending and stop clubs going broke, all clubs must fit player spending under $3.2 million. Effectively, the league has cut off clubs' ability to match current contract payments, let alone compete with huge money offers from overseas. As I've said in the past, if the salary cap limit was staggered over time to allow clubs to adjust to the regulations, the mass player exodus we're seeing at the moment could have been avoided. Plenty of highlights last weekend, but also too many high shots featured. Canberra's David Atkins was outed for the rest of the regular season for this one. The Saints' Jason Riles and Para's Dave Wesley both copped a week, as did Tamana Tahu, but Tony Butterfield walked on his high tackle charge. On to the tips, and firstly tonight, the Knights aren't afraid of the dark, but they've only won 6 from 17 which they've played at night, and I reckon they'll make it 7. And the other games, Eels, Tigers, Storm and the Eagles to win their games, while Canberra, Brisbane to win their games at home. Well, good luck for your tips. It's going to be pretty tough. Back to you, Rabs.
With Newcastle set to lose the likes of Butterfield, Shields and Fairley next season, it was important the club kept a hold of some of its rising talent. At 19, back rower Steve Simpson has already become a regular in the Knights' first-grade squad, while fellow teenager Josh Perry has started his top-grade starts this season. Simpson has signed on for 3 years, Perry just the one. Meanwhile, Troy Fletcher completes the 4-man bench tonight against the Roosters, with the visitors to be without State of Origin winger Matt Singh. He's torn a hamstring. Knights captain Tony Butterfield skipped a 4-match suspension midweek to lead a side on the edge of the 8 against a team it hasn't beaten at home since 1996.
I think concentrating on where we are on the ladder can put the boys in a false sense of security or can distract them. I think it's important to focus more on game by game.
All the action on NBN from 8:30. It was a day where it paid to keep your eye on the ball. But sometimes you just didn't see it coming. Like this suspect pass to Jared O'Doherty, but it didn't stop the big back rower from breaking through Lake's defence, and he found former Seagull junior Craig Camorley in support. The halfback flew away to score the first. If Lakes thought they were hard done by then, Brett Cullen's effort was denied. But you needed a second look to see why Paul Skovgaard spent some time off the park. While Lakes' defence could only watch on as Andrew Taylor finished what Camorley started. 12-0 down, Lakes needed the luck of the bounce in a big way, and they couldn't have asked for better when Clary Moran ended up with it for the visitors first. After half-time, neither side held back. But not long after, Lakes levelled with a cross-field kick that fell perfectly for Chris Hall. While the match winner came after a Paul Allardyce dart from dummy half. Lakes United winning 18-12.
These oranges have the look and the taste that overseas buyers are demanding. A new quality assurance program aims to provide consistent quality and boost Australia's $140 million citrus export industry.
We've been able to put exporters in touch with potential buyers in countries like Japan and Korea.
Currently, local growers supply just 1% of the world's citrus fruit, but the AgCell program means business, and it's already proved its worth for at least one exporter who's broken into the Japanese market.
The advantage there is that we know where our product's going, we visit the market and we know what the consumer wants.
Increasing the yield of early and late varieties, as well as the growth of developing markets, are set to boost sales and increase export production. Brooke Webster, NBN News.
And is now planning to increase export production in traditional and new. The trial of 53-year-old Julie Edwards began in Newcastle District Court a week ago after the Toronto woman pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of imposing upon the Department of Social Security. The charges allege she made untrue representations to the department between October 1993 and April 1998, which led to her incorrectly obtaining the amount of $38,000. But in Newcastle District Court this morning, Judge Coulahan said he had no choice but to discharge the 12-member jury because it was brought to his attention that some of them had heard sarcastic and derogatory comments broadcast on a local radio station. Labelling the commentary as the most irresponsible piece of radio presentation I've ever heard in my life, he said that regrettably and at a great cost to the community, he was forced to declare a mistrial. Replaying the tape this afternoon, Judge Coulahan signalled that he would pursue appropriate recommendations in due course as to actions that ought to be taken against this station and these presenters. It's estimated that more than $100,000 has already been spent on the 6-day trial. The case has been adjourned to July 14 when the new trial date will be fixed. Helen Kapalos, NBN News.
Brett Kamali's move from Melbourne to the Northern Eagles is massive news, as we've heard all week in the media. But what it will do behind the scenes for the Eagles is add credibility to what's been probably a reasonably disappointing year. It'll also attract other key players in positions that the club desperately need to fill. With that, speculation is high that Aaron Mule and Matt Guy will follow suit. The outside backs for the Eagles need a boost, and these two guys will fit the bill perfectly. When a team wins the premiership, it has little bonuses along the way which help make it a good season, and Knights winger Lenny Beckett has been that unexpected bonus. He's just turned 20 years of age and certainly wasn't in anyone's calculations to play such a major role this year. After Darren Albert's huge run of injuries, Lenny's distinctive running style, fast leg speed, dynamic step, has culminated in a genuine first-class performance last week against the Roosters. And with Lenny's contract coming up this season, the young fella's future is looking pretty bright. And on to round 23's tips, and the Knights have overcome their Friday night hoodoo last week with a win against the Roosters, but they've got to do the same again this Friday night with the added statistic that the Knights haven't beat the Eels at Parramatta Stadium for 11 years. With 3 weeks ago, I think the boys have hit form and will do the job. Penrith Dragons clash will be a tough one. After Penrith's touch-up last weekend at ANZ Stadium, they'll be keen to get back on form at home. But the Dragons are in great attacking mode with Barrett, Roberts, Hookie and Blacklock leading the charge. I think they can do the job. Now the Storm, Sharks, Broncos, Raiders to win their games, and for an upset, the Cowboys will knock off the Tigers, I think, up there at Dairy Farm Stadium.
For the first time, a drop knee section is being contested at the state and national level, but the blue ribbon event is the open men's, and with riders like regular Aussie Tour pro Brock Simpson taking part, competition is tough. But Simon Sweeney clocked up some airtime in the opening heat of the men's to land in the semis tomorrow. Joining him in the final 8 as well, Michael Chappell. Australian champion Matt Whitter also looked in hot form, but this wasn't his day. He was knocked out by Port Macquarie's Robbie Gray, who showed he'll be tough to beat tomorrow. It was a case of dodging drop-ins of a different kind at Mount Sugarloaf in the opening round of the Pro Kart Series. The 125cc powered Rotex karts are the quickest in the series, and Aaron Soper needed every bit of it, starting from the back of the pack. The Talara driver worked his way through the field, but it looked to be a 2-horse race between Scott Smith and Andrew Mill. But how quickly things change, Mill and Smith coming together with just 3 laps left. That opened the door for Soper, who took the lead and the race. Mill not finishing after a second collision on the same corner. It was Cessnock who had the first chance to score, but Craig Wise's effort was called back. From there, it was all Waratah in the first 40 minutes. Winger Damien Griffiths, on the end of some good lead-up work to post the first. Centre Frank Barrett was having a field day out wide. He sliced through some threadbare Cessnock defence to set up Steve Story, and the visitors had a 12-point lead. But the Cheetahs were far from done. Another 2 tries before half-time, and the game was as good as over at 22-0. The home side got on the board after the break, but the lead was too much to catch, especially against the competition leaders. Waratah Mayfield taking the game by 22 points.